Snowfall had arrived early in the Montana highlands. The first week of November usually brought a light dusting, something to kiss the barn roofs and dust the hay bales. But this time, a cruel cold had swept in without warning. Bitter winds howled through the valley like wolves, tearing across the fields and sweeping over the copper-colored hills that gave the town its name. Colton Maddox had just finished his morning ride when he saw something small lying on the side of the old gravel road that led to the farthest part of his 80,000-acre ranch. At first, he thought it was a piece of discarded clothing, or maybe an animal. But something about the shape felt wrong. Too still, too human. He slowed his black gelding, Duststorm, to a halt. "Easy, boy," Colton muttered, staring hard through the swirling snow. The wind cut across his face like knives, but he barely felt it. He dismounted quickly, boots crunching deep into the snow as he moved toward the shape. There, curled tightly into himself, was a child. A boy no older than 8 or 9. His skin was pale, lips nearly blue, and his arms were hugged around his knees like he was trying to disappear. He wore a tattered hoodie soaked through with snow, and jeans so thin they may as well have been paper. No gloves, no coat, no boots, just cold, damp sneakers and socks that had long since frozen stiff. "Son of a," Colton dropped to his knees and touched the boy's cheek, ice cold. Hey, kid, can you hear me?" he called, his voice urgent. The boy stirred slightly, eyes barely slitting open. "Mama said she'd be right back," the boy mumbled, voice barely a breath. Colton's jaw clenched. "Where's your mama now?" he asked, scanning the road and the white horizon beyond. Nothing. Not a soul, just snow. Without wasting another second, Colton yanked off his thick shearling coat and wrapped it around the boy. He lifted him up gently. The child's body was frighteningly light, like he hadn't eaten a full meal in weeks. "You're gonna be all right. You hear me?" Colton whispered. "Hang on, little man." Mounting back up on Duststorm with the boy in his arms took effort, but Colton did it fast and clean. He nudged the horse into a gallop toward the main house. The Maddox ranch house was more like a lodge, stone fireplaces, floor-to-ceiling windows, and long beams of old pine salvaged from the Rockies. A billion-dollar empire had built it, but today it was the only shelter between that boy and death. "Maria," Colton shouted the moment he burst through the front door. His longtime housekeeper rushed into the foyer, wiping her hands on her apron. "Seaguar Colton, blankets, hot water. I found a boy outside, nearly frozen. Hurry." The sight of the limp child in Colton's arms stopped her heart. She didn't ask questions. She turned and ran. Colton carried the boy to the living room and laid him carefully on the thick bare rug by the stone hearth. The fire was already crackling. He gently unwrapped the frozen sneakers from the boy's feet. The skin underneath was red and raw. Maria returned with quilts, hot towels, and a basin of warm water. They moved fast and worked in silence. Warmth seeped slowly into the boy's limbs. His fingers twitched. His lips parted in a soft whimper. "I think he's coming back to us," Maria said. Her voice hushed. Colton stared at the boy's face. Pale, freckled, thin, eyes shut tight as though still running from something in a dream. He felt something stir deep in his gut, something he hadn't felt in years. A protective instinct. Raw and heavy. As the evening came on, the child stirred. Again, his eyes fluttered open, still hazy. "You're safe now," Colton whispered, leaning close. "You're in a warm place." The boy looked at him, confused. His small voice trembled. "Where's Mama?" Colton exhaled slowly. "I don't know, son. I didn't see anyone, just you." The boy's face crumpled slightly, but no tears. Came only silence. "What's your name?" Colton asked gently. The boy blinked slowly, trying to remember. I don't know." Colton looked up at Maria. She crossed herself quietly. Then we'll figure it out, Colton said softly, placing a hand over the boys, one thing at a time. The wind outside howled louder, but inside that room, a new kind of silence settled, one that comes not with fear, but the strange, fragile beginning of hope. Morning broke slowly over the Maddox Ranch, the snow-covered landscape glowing in a soft pink hue as the first rays of light cut through the storm's remnants. Inside the warm walls of Colton's great lodge, the boy lay wrapped in woolen quilts, his body finally still, his breathing steady. Colton Maddox hadn't slept. He sat in a leather armchair by the fire, his elbows resting on his knees, watching the boy like a man trying to solve a riddle too old for words. His phone buzzed beside him, forgotten. Business could wait. Maria walked in with a bowl of oatmeal and honey. He needs to eat, she said gently. But he still hasn't said his name. Colton shook his head. He asked for his mama, then went quiet. He doesn't remember anything else. Maria sat beside the boy, touching his forehead with the back of her hand. Could be trauma, she murmured. Sometimes children block memories when it hurts too much. Colton's jaw tightened. He'd seen a lot in his life: fences broken by storms, cattle lost in blizzards, business partners lie with polished smiles, but something about a boy forgotten by the world made him feel powerless. Just then, the boy stirred. "Hey," Colton said softly, rising to kneel beside the couch. "You're safe now. You're at my ranch." The boy blinked, confused, then looked at the fire. "My name's Colton," the cowboy continued. "You don't have to remember everything. Just tell me, how do you feel?" The boy paused, then whispered, "Tired, hungry." Maria smiled and handed Colton the bowl. "Then let's start with this." Colton sat down beside him and offered a spoonful. The boy hesitated, then took it. "What should I call you?" Colton asked. "Until you remember." The boy didn't answer right away. He looked at the fire again, as though trying to find his name in the flicker of the flames. "You can call me whatever you want," he finally said. Colton gave a half smile. "All right. How about Dusty?" The boy tilted his head. "Why?" "Well," Colton said, glancing at his horse outside the window, "that was the name of the toughest horse I ever knew. Small but stubborn, had fire in his heart." The boy gave the smallest hint of a grin. "Okay, Dusty." Later that day, Sheriff Rick Dalton stopped by the ranch after hearing from one of the hens that Colton had brought in a half-dead child from the snow. "You file a report yet?" he asked, setting his hat down. "Missing persons, runaway, anything?" "Not yet," Colton replied, folding his arms. "Kid doesn't remember his name, where he's from, or how he got there. Just remembers his mama saying she'd be right back." Sheriff Dalton frowned. "You think she left him on purpose?" "I don't know," Colton muttered, "but she didn't come back." "Well, we'll check reports from the surrounding counties. Maybe someone's looking for him." Colton didn't answer. He just looked back toward the living room where Dusty was dozing on the couch, cradled in blankets like a newborn. Something inside him had already made a quiet decision. He wasn't going to let the boy go back to wherever he'd come from, not without answers. That night, as the wind calmed and the stars returned to the Montana sky, Dusty sat up and looked around the vast, quiet lodge. "Is this all yours?" he asked Colton, who was setting logs into the fireplace. "Yep, built it myself." "Well, I had help," he added with a chuckle. Dusty's eyes were wide. "It's like a castle, something like that," Colton said. "Do you live here all alone?" Colton paused. The question hit harder than he expected. "I guess I do." Dusty looked down. "That must be lonely sometimes," Colton admitted. Then he turned to the boy. "But not tonight." The boy looked up at him, eyes still tired, but something new behind them, something like trust. And in that moment, in the firelight glow of a massive ranch house far away from the world, two souls who'd lost too much sat quietly finding something neither expected. Not yet family, but no longer strangers. News traveled fast in small towns, especially in Copper Hills. And when a billionaire rancher like Colton Maddox showed up at Millie's diner with a mysterious little boy wrapped in a worn scarf, the whispers started before they'd even reached the counter. Colton walked in, Dusty's small hand held tightly in his own. It had been 3 days since he found the boy in the snow, and though the child still spoke little, he was eating more and walking on his own. The bell above the door jingled. Heads turned. "Is that a kid with Colton Maddox?" a waitress whispered. Behind the counter. "Thought he lived alone," someone murmured from a booth. "Always said he didn't need family." Millie, the gray-haired owner with a sharp eye and soft heart, waved them toward a corner booth. "Coffee for you, Colton, and something warm for your friend, please," Colton said, nodding. "Pancakes, bacon, hot chocolate if you've got it." She leaned in close. "People are talking. They always do," he said flatly. Millie raised an eyebrow. "Well, this time they're wondering if you've finally adopted someone." Colton looked at Dusty, who sat silently across from him, eyes tracing the syrup bottle on the table like it was a treasure chest. "It's not like that," he said. "Found him near the water tower, half frozen." Millie's eyes softened. "God help him, poor thing. He's lucky you came along." Colton didn't reply, just stirred his coffee and watched Dusty gently trace the steam rising from his cocoa. The diner chatter picked up as more locals arrived, but it couldn't drown out the curiosity. A few familiar ranchers approached with cautious greetings. "Morning, Colton," said a man in a tan duster. "That your nephew or something?" "No," Colton replied. The man looked at Dusty. "Well, he sure looks like he trusts you." Dusty didn't speak. He just held Colton's hand under the table, quietly squeezing it tighter. After breakfast, they stepped back out into the snow, the streets now glazed with ice from the overnight freeze. Colton lifted Dusty into the passenger seat of his truck and closed the door with a heavy thunk. He could feel it, the town watching. Windows with twitching curtains, eyes behind tinted glass. Inside the cab, Dusty finally spoke. "Why were they all looking at us?" Colton paused, then started the engine. "'Cause small towns don't get many surprises, especially ones that show up in cowboy boots and cocoa-stained smiles." Dusty was quiet for a moment. "They think I'm yours now, don't they?" Colton glanced at him. "Does that bother you?" The boy shrugged. "I don't know." Colton nodded and drove. In silence. Truth was, he didn't know either. He didn't know why he'd taken Dusty to the diner, why he wanted people to see them together, or why it mattered what the boy felt about it. But somehow, it all did. Back at the ranch, the snow had begun to fall again, light this time, like feathers drifting from the clouds. Dusty spent the afternoon helping Maria fold laundry and talking to the ranch hands, who had already taken to calling him Little Chief. That evening, Colton stood on the porch, a hot mug in his hands, watching the boy chase a dog across the yard. There was laughter in the air, now faint and fleeting but real. He hadn't heard that sound on his land in years. The last time had been before his brother's accident, before the inheritance fights, before the loneliness swallowed everything but cattle and contracts. Colton turned as Maria joined him. "He's changing the feel of this place," she said quietly. Colton nodded. "He's changing me." Maria smiled. "Maybe it's about time." Later, that night, as Colton tucked Dusty into a guest room, the boy asked, "Are you gonna send me away if someone comes for me?" Colton paused. "If someone good comes for you, someone who loves you, then maybe. But not just anyone." Dusty looked up, scared. "What if nobody comes?" Colton's voice was steady. Then you've already got a place right here. Dusty nodded once, rolled over, and whispered, "Okay." Colton watched him fall asleep and felt something deeper settle in his chest, a weight that wasn't heavy but grounding. Not charity, not pity, something older, something like love. 3 weeks had passed since Colton Maddox found Dusty in the snow, and though the boy's memory hadn't returned, he had found a rhythm at the ranch, feeding the chickens, riding beside Colton in the truck, brushing the horses each evening, like it was a sacred ritual. He still didn't say much about his past, but he laughed more now. And sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, he'd sing to the ranch dog under his breath. Then came the knock. It was dusk when Colton opened the front door to find a woman standing on his porch, her coat soaked with sleet and her boots worn thin. Her eyes were wide and tired, like someone who hadn't slept in days. I heard from Sheriff Dalton you found a boy," she said, breathless. "A small boy in the snow." Colton narrowed his eyes, studying her face. "And who are you?" She hesitated. "My name's Sierra. Sierra Lane. I don't know if he's mine, but I lost someone. My sister ran off with her little boy 2 months ago. Nobody's seen them since." Colton stepped back cautiously. "Come inside. You're half frozen." She stepped into the warmth of the lodge, her eyes scanning everything: fireplace, pictures, antlers on the walls, until they landed on Dusty, who was seated at the table coloring in silence. She gasped, "Oh my God." Colton raised a hand. "Don't rush him." Dusty looked up. The woman's eyes brimmed with tears. "Micah, baby, is that you?" The boy blinked, startled. His crayon dropped. His body stiffened. Then he whispered, "Micah." She stepped closer. "Micah Lane. I'm your aunt. I used to rock you to sleep when your mama worked night shifts. Do you remember me, sweetheart?" Dusty Micah shook his head slowly. "You look familiar, but I don't know." Sierra knelt beside him, voice trembling. "You were taken. My sister, your mama, she ran when things got bad. She was scared of losing you to social services. There was a custody case. She didn't want to lose her baby, but she didn't know what else to do." Colton remained silent, his heart pounding. "She left me a note," Sierra whispered, still looking at the boy. "Said if anything ever happened to her, she hoped someone would care for you." And then she disappeared. Dusty's face paled. "Is she gone?" Sierra nodded slowly. "We don't know, but we're looking." The boy stared at his crayon on the floor, not picking it up. Colton finally stepped in. "What do you want from him?" Sierra looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. "I just want him safe. I've been calling hospitals, sheriffs, even child services. And when I heard a billionaire rancher found a freezing child, I prayed it was him." Colton's fists tightened. "He's been through a lot. I know," she said gently, "but I'm not here to tear him away. I just want to give him a chance to remember, a chance to know he's still loved." Dusty glanced between them. "Do I have to go?" Colton met his gaze. "Not unless you want to." The boy looked at Sierra, then back at Colton. "Can I just talk to her first? Not go anywhere. Just talk." Colton nodded. "Of course." Later, as the two sat on the porch under a blanket of stars, Sierra told stories of his mom, of their tiny apartment above a flower shop, of the old teddy bear Micah used to carry with a missing button eye. Dusty listened, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. I remember the bear." Sierra smiled. "His name was Buttons. You never went anywhere without him." Colton watched from inside, heart aching. Maria walked over. "You all right?" "I don't know," he muttered. "I've been trying not to get too close, but now I'm not sure I can let him go." Maria placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Maybe you don't have to." That night, Dusty crawled into Colton's lap by the fireplace, holding a new drawing in his hands. "I think my name is Micah, but I still like Dusty better." "Colton," smiled. Then Dusty it is, and in that moment, with truth finally beginning to return and choices looming in the distance, a new kind of bond formed stronger than blood, rooted in choice, built on trust, and sealed by firelight. The following morning dawned quiet, the snow having stopped sometime in the night. A pale sun rose over the mountains, casting golden light over the frost-covered fields of the Maddox Ranch. But inside the house, the warmth of the fire couldn't match the tension in the air. Colton stood at the kitchen counter, staring into his coffee like it might give him answers. Across the room, Sierra folded her hands in her lap, watching Dusty Micah quietly stack blocks on the rug. The boy hadn't said much since the porch talk last night, but he hadn't asked Sierra to leave either. "He belongs with family," Sierra finally said, softly but firmly. Colton looked up, his eyes hard, but not cruel. "You think he's not safe here? That's not what I'm saying," she replied. "I'm saying he needs roots, blood, people who remember his past." "I'm not his blood," Colton admitted, "but I've been the one sitting up with him at night when he wakes up screaming. I taught him how to brush a horse, how to hold a hammer, how to ride. Blood doesn't make a family. Showing up does." Sierra flinched, but didn't argue. "You've done more for him than anyone. I can see that." Dusty looked up from the rug, his voice breaking the silence. "Do I have to choose?" Both adults turned to him. "I don't want to leave," Dusty said, "but I don't want to lose her either." Sierra crossed the room and knelt beside him. "You won't lose me, baby, if you stay here. I'll still be around. If you leave, you can still write to him, call him. None of this has to be forever." Colton walked over slowly and crouched beside them. "You don't have to decide today, but you do get a say in what happens." Dusty looked at both of them. "Can I show you something?" He ran to the table and came back with two drawings, one of Colton and him riding horses, the other of Sierra holding a small boy with a bear named Buttons. "I want both of these pictures to be real," he whispered. Sierra's eyes welled up. "We'll find a way." That afternoon, the three of them drove into town and sat down with Sheriff Dalton and a woman from Family Services, who had come in from the county office after Sierra made the call. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "Well, I'll tell you, it's not often we see something like this. A missing boy, presumed gone, winds up safe with a man like Colton Maddox. Most stories like this don't end this way." The Family Services rep nodded. "Legally, Sierra has claim. She's the next of kin. But given Micah's trauma, we're not looking to move fast. The state always prioritizes the child's best interest, and from what I hear, this ranch has become something of a miracle for him." Dusty sat between Sierra and Colton, looking small but calm. The woman continued. "We can begin shared custody, trial period. Micah Dusty can stay with Mr. Maddox and visit his aunt regularly while we evaluate long-term options." Dusty looked up. "So, I can have both." "You can," she said, "but only if that's what you want." Dusty looked at Colton, then at Sierra. "I want both." Back at the ranch that evening, Colton sat on the porch with Dusty in his lap, wrapped in a wool blanket. "So, I get to grown-ups now?" Dusty asked. Colton smiled. "Yeah, lucky you. Does that mean I'm not just a guest anymore?" Colton looked down at him, his voice quiet. "You were never just a guest, Dusty. From the first moment I saw you in the snow, I knew you were meant to be here, even if it wasn't forever." Dusty leaned into him. "Feels like forever." "Then let's take it one day at a time," Colton said. Dusty nodded, and for the first time since he'd arrived at the ranch, he let out a deep, peaceful sigh as if the weight of the unknown had finally lifted. It began with a distant rumble, not thunder but wind, rolling in heavy from the mountains. By sundown, Copper Hills was swallowed by white. The biggest blizzard in years had struck, cutting power lines, freezing roads, and locking ranchers and townsfolk indoors. At the Maddox Ranch, the generators kicked in, and fires roared in every hearth. Colton wasn't worried about the storm his ranch had weathered worse, but tonight, things felt different. Dusty, now more confident, had just come back from the barn with a ranch hand when the wind started howling. Sierra had gone back to her small house just outside town 2 days earlier after her first shared visit. She promised to return after the weekend. Dusty stared out the window as the snow piled high. Is she okay out there? Colton knelt beside him. She's got a wood stove, backup heater, and more canned food than I do. She'll be all right. Dusty was quiet a moment. I like having her around, but I'm glad I'm here. Colton ruffled his hair. Me too, partner. The storm raged through the night, winds pounding the windows like fists, snow piling up in chest-high drifts. Most ranches in the region were silent, dark, powerless. But inside the lodge, the fire kept burning, and Dusty stayed curled up in Colton's oversized flannel shirt, watching flames dance in the hearth. Around midnight, a frantic pounding echoed through the house. Colton grabbed his rifle and moved toward the door cautiously. He opened it to find a ranch hand, panicked and panting. It's the south barn. The man shouted. Roofs caved in from snow. Wait, we got 6 calves trapped inside. They'll freeze. Colton's eyes narrowed. Get the others. I'll meet you there. He turned to see Dusty standing behind him, wide-eyed. Stay inside, Colton said. But Dusty didn't back away. Can I help? Colton hesitated. He saw something in the boy's face, determination that went far beyond his years. All right, he said finally. But you stay behind me. You listen. No hero moves, understand? Dusty nodded. Outside, the storm was like stepping into a nightmare. Snow whipped sideways, visibility down to a few feet. But they trudged forward. Colton, Dusty, and 3 ranch hands bundled in coats, ropes slung across their shoulders. The barn roof had buckled, timber beams groaning under the weight of heavy snow. Calves cried out from within. Stay back, Colton ordered as he climbed inside. Dusty huddled by the door, holding a lantern that shook in his tiny hands. One calf was already buried under a beam. The others cowered in a corner, legs trembling. Colton and the men moved fast, using makeshift pulleys to raise the collapsed beam. Then, just as they were pulling out the last trapped calf, a second loud crack split the air. The far wall began to collapse. Move, someone shouted. Snow and timber poured in. In the chaos, Dusty saw Colton shove a ranch hand out of the way, then get slammed to the ground by a falling board. Colton, Dusty screamed, running forward. Dusty, no. Someone yelled, but the boy didn't stop. He dropped to his knees beside Colton, who was half buried in snow and splintered wood, wincing in pain. I'm okay, Colton muttered, blood on his forehead. Get the others out. I'm not leaving you, Dusty cried. You didn't leave me. In that moment, the barn no longer existed. There was just a boy shielding the man who saved him. Ranch hands cleared the wreckage quickly. Within minutes, Colton was pulled free and leaning on their shoulders. As they stumbled back toward the house, Dusty refused to let go of Colton's hand even as snow stung his cheeks and wind howled like wolves. Back inside, Maria bandaged Colton's head while Dusty sat close, arms folded like a little soldier guarding his captain. You all right, boss? She asked. Colton nodded, wincing. I'll live, Dusty whispered. You're not allowed to leave me. Colton smiled weakly. Not going anywhere, partner. Promise. Then Dusty did something he'd never done before. He climbed into Colton's lap and wrapped his arms around his chest. And Colton, strong and silent, wrapped him right back. No storm could shake this. No snow could bury it. Something unbreakable had formed in that barn, forged through fire, fear, and loyalty, a bond no blizzard could undo. By the time the blizzard passed, it had become the worst storm Copper Hills had seen in over 2 decades. Roads were shut down. Power remained out across half the county. And yet, on the outskirts of town, at the Maddox Ranch, the fire still burned, and something else had begun to thaw too. Word spread quickly. Colton Maddox, the reclusive billionaire cowboy, had nearly died saving a barn full of calves. But what shocked people most wasn't the rescue, it was who'd refused to leave his side. Dusty, the boy the town once gossiped about, the boy no one had claimed, the boy they'd seen coloring in a booth at Millie's diner just weeks ago. Now they were calling him something else. Colton's son. Not legally, not yet. But something deeper had changed, something no paper could define. 3 days after the storm, the town held a gathering at the Grange Hall. It was meant to be a relief effort: blankets, canned food, emergency heating supplies. But conversations buzzed louder than any generator. Millie stood behind her pie table whispering to the sheriff. Ranchers chatted by the stove, exchanging theories and awe-filled accounts of Colton's rescue. But it wasn't until the front doors swung open that everything went silent. Colton walked in, head bandaged, moving slow but steady, and beside him, holding his hand, was Dusty, clean-shaven, boots on, wearing a coat 2 sizes too big, and a proud smile on his face. The silence broke with applause. It wasn't polite clapping. It was loud, proud, soul-stirring appreciation. People who'd spent years viewing Colton Maddox as untouchable now saw him as something else: human, vulnerable, a father in the making. Colton raised a hand humbly, his voice quiet but clear. "I didn't come here for thanks. We've all been through hell this week. But I did come to say something." The room leaned in. "This boy," he said, resting a hand on Dusty's shoulder, "was alone when I found him. And I thought I was doing the saving. Truth is, he saved me right back, in ways I didn't know I needed." Dusty looked up at him, eyes shining. "I don't know where the road leads," Colton continued, "but I know this wherever it goes. He's riding beside me." Tears flowed. Even the sheriff had to look away and clear his throat. Then Sierra stepped forward, a smile on her face. "I spoke to the judge this morning," she said, "and I signed the paperwork." Colton blinked. "What paperwork?" "The guardianship agreement," she replied. "Temporary custody was good. But Dusty deserves more than halfway. He deserves a father." The room gasped. Dusty looked at her, stunned. "You're not mad, baby," Sierra said, kneeling to his level. "I love you more than you know. But love means letting go when someone else can give you the life you were meant to have. And Colton, he's not just good for you, you're good for him." Dusty threw his arms around her, burying his face into her shoulder. She held him for a long time. Then he turned to Colton. "Is this real?" Colton, already choked up, dropped to one knee and looked the boy square in the eye. "You still want to keep the name Dusty?" he asked. Dusty grinned. "Yeah." "Then, how do you feel about Dusty Maddox?" The boy nodded slowly, then faster. Then he launched himself into Colton's arms. The town of Copper Hills would never forget that day. They watched as the man who had built an empire of cattle, oil, and silence finally did something none of them expected. He let someone in, and he didn't stop there. Colton started a fund in Dusty's name, the Micah Foundation, to support lost or abandoned kids across the state. He built cabins on the edge of his property for children needing shelter. And every Thanksgiving, the town gathered at the Maddox Ranch for a feast big enough to feed every soul in the county. Dusty rode his own pony by spring and was already learning to rope cattle by summer. And though he still had nightmares sometimes, he never faced them alone again. Colton kept his promise. He never left, and Dusty, once a nameless boy freezing in the snow, became something more than anyone imagined. A son, a hero, and a story the town would tell for generations.